12. Blood spatters across the floor, staining large patches of the white carpet red. Grunts followed by whimpering sobs flood the house, but no one seems to care, except me. No one else steps forward to help. My father drops to his knees in the middle of the reception room of my first home, the house I grew up in, near the border to Zone 1 before Mother and I were relocated. Dribbles of blood seep from between his cracked lips, and I hardly recognize him past his facial injuries. His left eye swollen shut, the other tinged red where burst blood vessels have all but overtaken the white. His cheeks are marred with black and purple bruises, disfiguring his alabaster complexion. My feet stumble backward as a cry lodges deep in my throat. Why is this happening? And why is no one else trying to stop it? My mother snatches my arm and jerks me away from him, dragging me back toward the hallway. Mother's here now, I tell myself with relief. Surely she'll try to help. Take her out of here. She doesn't need to see this. My mother hisses over her shoulder as a strong pair of hands lift me clean off the ground and haul me out of the reception room. Through my panic, I notice the man's black helmet, a standard element of the enforcer's regulation uniform. The tears streaming down my splotchy red cheeks are reflected in the opaque shield hiding his face. I stretch my hand out in desperation, screaming at the top of my lungs. My father looks up, his remaining good eye glassy, when I cry for them to leave him alone, when I beg them not to take him away. My cries cease as he mutters the last words he would ever say to me. I'm sorry, Wynter. Time seems to slow as I fight against the hands restraining me, but I'm not strong enough to escape them. As I struggle, my father's voice replays in my thoughts like an echo. I'm sorry, Wynter. Static skews his face and then he's just gone, taken from me as quickly as he was when I was a child. I blink, heavy sobs racking my lungs, as the memory of the worst day of my life falls away, piece by piece, disintegrating into ash until all that's left before me is an endless wasteland of destruction. I turn in place, taking in what remains of the heart, my gaze catching on a familiar face, the only one among the apocalyptic nothingness. Ezra's here, just like the last time I saw this. Tears leave lines on his cinder-smeared cheeks as his lips shape the same words my father once said to me, words that are now like a bullet ripping straight through my heart. I'm sorry, Wynter, he whispers. Static again as their voices surround me, blending together and ringing in a torturous loop with the sole intent of driving me mad. I'm sorry. I clutch my head, dragging my fingernails over my scalp, as if that will somehow pull the voices out of my skull. I'm sorry. My eyes burn as the black hole of my shattered heart consumes me, and I drop to my knees, praying for the vision to end. I can't take it anymore. Wynter? I can't take it. Wynter! My eyes spring open, thrusting me back into consciousness. My chest heaves as I take in the details of the small storage room, the cramped space empty aside from a few shelving units and the uncomfortable folding cot underneath me. Warm tears wet my cheeks and leave a salty residue on my lips. I brush them away when the door creaks open. Wynter, I'm coming in. I sit up just as the woman I met before walks into the room holding a thin metal tray. The sight of solid food makes me realize just how hungry I am, and my stomach growls at the delicious scent wafting into the space alongside her, coaxing a knowing grin onto her lips. I can only imagine how they fed me when I was unconscious, but I'm sure this method is preferable for both of us. Her smile deepens when our eyes meet, as if she's genuinely happy to see me again, although I can't understand why she would be. If my nightmare just now has reminded me of anything, it's that standing against the state gets you killed. Harboring a fugitive is worse, much worse, and if you're caught, You'll wish for death before the DSD is even finished with you." Her smile falters when fresh tears slip down my cheeks, and she sets the tray on the floor before taking a seat on the squeaky cot beside me. "Are you all right?" Her fingers are warm as she places a gentle hand on my arm. I flinch away from her touch, giving a quick, jerky nod. But my unsteady breaths reveal the truth I'm too much of a coward to voice. My lips quiver with the threat of a sob as I wipe the moisture from my face. I had a dream about my father. About the last time I saw him alive. "I'm sorry," she whispers, her voice consoling. I don't know how to react to her sentiment. In the heart, we're encouraged not to show our grief, and above all, never to express it to others, especially if the person our grief is aimed at was found guilty of breaking the law. Enemies of the state don't deserve to be mourned. That's what the state has always taught us, and yet, even now, years later, I still can't help mourning my father. I look down at the floor, unaccustomed to showing such weakness, to showing any emotion at all. To suppress is to survive. My mother's voice says in my head, surfacing from the depths of my memory, like a hand reaching out to catch me from falling. "Don't let anyone see what you feel." So that's how I lived until my time at the DSD. I followed 3 rules to ensure what I felt would always stay hidden from watchful eyes, just like everyone else in the heart. Together, we feel nothing, and in feeling nothing, we are kept apart. But the people here, this woman, Jenner, even Ezra, they all wear their emotions plainly, putting what they feel on full display for anyone around to witness. They don't bother to hide what's in their hearts. They don't try to mask who they are. As I stare at the floor, my unblinking eyes boring imaginary holes into the concrete, I realize that I envy them. How they live here is in direct opposition to the forced emotional seclusion the state has manufactured in our society. I can only imagine how freeing it must be to allow yourself to be who you are, to let yourself feel what you truly feel, without fear of punishment. "Do you mind if I ask what happened to him?" she says after a moment of silence has passed. I glance at her out of the corner of my eye as the lump lodged in my throat seems to double in size. "He was executed for treason." I breathe, every word a burden I can't seem to shake. My last memory of him is of when he was taken. I never saw him again after that. I don't know what I expect from her. Shock, maybe? Horror? Disgust? After all, it's not uncommon for people to distance themselves from someone who's been touched by death, the way I have. Distance is safer. Distance ensures we remain unnoticed, that we're invisible to the state, and to be invisible is to stay alive. But she doesn't look at me that way. Instead, I see something in her gaze no one would ever dare publicly reveal. Pity. It shines in her eyes, along with an understanding of sorts, as if she can empathize with my pain, as if she's felt that sort of grief too. You know, everyone here has lost someone or something to the state. But that's why we fight, so our losses don't have to be for nothing. She folds her fingers around mine and shifts closer, bumping my shoulder with her upper arm. The warmth I sensed from her before is only intensified by her touch. "We aren't that different, you know. I don't know why you were looking for Ezra, but maybe you belong with us. Maybe you're here for a reason." A frown tugs down the corners of my lips, and I resist the urge to snort. "I'm not so sure about that. You don't know what I am. You don't know what I've done." The memory of that female attendant at the DSD comes rushing back, triggering a surge of bile to climb up my throat. Even now, I can see her seizing body so clearly. Swallowing, I shake the recollection away. I wish I could find the words to explain that I didn't search for Phoenix because I desired acceptance. I only wanted to find Ezra to help me grasp what's happening to me, so I can get answers about this world I don't fully understand, so I can figure out what role he will eventually come to play in my life, and in that terrible future I saw. The woman chuckles under her breath. I am. You and me, we're more alike than you know. I lean away from her, gaping a little, unsure what to make of her bold but blind sense of trust. She grew up in the state, didn't she? She must know how dangerous trust can be. How can you say that when you don't even know me? I ask, my voice failing to hide my amazement. She squints at the ceiling as if considering her answer. Call it a gut feeling. I see the same fear in you I once saw in myself, that I still see in myself. What are you afraid of? The words leave my lips before the thought has even fully registered. I should know better than to pry. In the state, such an act is forbidden, but I can't help myself. Ever since the day of my placement exam, it's as if the rules of my old world are slipping away a little bit more every day. At what point will those rules no longer matter to me? At what point will I be free of their tether? A kind smile unfurls across the woman's face when she meets my gaze again. Everything. I know what that feels like, to always be scared, to worry I'm only one breath away from doing something that would see me following in my father's footsteps, far sooner than I would like. Hell, I know that feeling better than most. Her unabashed honesty resonates with me in a way I wouldn't have ever expected. Maybe because this isn't how our world works. We don't make eye contact. We don't develop close relationships or talk to each other on a personal level. We don't show warmth or compassion to others, like she's displaying to me now. In my world, fear is used to keep us apart, whereas she's using it to bring us together. I meant what I said before. I'm not here to cause any problems for you. I know, she says. I can tell just by looking at you. You're one of the good guys too. I scoff. Well, I'm definitely not a spy for the state. Her eyes light up at my words, and she taps a finger against her lips as if deep in thought. So, maybe it's time we prove that to everyone. Everyone? My brow furrows when she jumps to her feet and tugs me off the bed, still clutching my hand. Come on, I bet you're dying to stretch your legs and get out of this stuffy room for a while. I hesitate, digging my heels into the floor as she tries to pull me toward the door. When she looks back at me, I stammer. I don't know. Ezra said I wasn't allowed to leave this room. I don't want to make him any angrier or distrusting of me than he already is. She rolls her eyes, waving a dismissive hand at me. Despite what he thinks, Ezra is not in charge around here. I have just as much authority as he does, and I say we're going for a walk. If he has a problem with it, well, that's on him. My heart hammers against my ribcage as she drags me along behind her, ignoring my protests. Oh, by the way, she adds as she throws open the door, my name is Ray Dorn. When she smiles once more, I'm disarmed by what I glimpse in her gaze. Not just kindness, but an offer of friendship. Such a concept is foreign to me. After all, friendship doesn't exist in the state. Maybe it's because of that deprivation I find myself wanting to know what it's like. Is someone like me even capable of it? I trail Ray through a series of hallways, the footpath just wide enough for us to walk side by side. Fluorescent lights hang at even intervals overhead, placed between a maze-like network of pipes, which follow along the full length of the low ceiling. The damp, musty air has a mossy taste to it, and as we walk, I notice there aren't any windows. If the lights were to fail, we'd be swallowed by darkness. The realization that follows this observation doesn't bring me any comfort. After so long trapped in the stifling confines of the DSD, breathing recycled air, the thought that I might be underground makes me anxious. It triggers memories I'd rather forget. "Are you okay?" Ray asks. I force a smile onto my face, but say nothing. For the first 10 minutes or so since leaving the cramped storage room, Ray and I are alone. I follow her steps through the compound, wondering how such a place could exist without the state knowing about it, which in turn only reminds me of all the secrets I'm hiding. Why I'm here, what's wrong with me, the fact that I've murdered someone. "We're more alike than you know," Ray had said. Are we, though? I wonder. The longer we walk, the more often we cross paths with the other residents here. They all stare at me with the same expression: confusion at first, followed by distrust. I don't blame them for viewing me as a threat. I'm sure they all know what happened at the Vega by now. But after the first dozen or so glances, I lower my eyes to escape the judgmental scrutiny of their gazes. I only look up again when we enter a large cavernous space, the warehouse-like room empty apart from a border of benches and some crates, a handful upturned to double as seats. At the opposite end of the room, Jenner waves at us. "Hey!" he shouts, his voice carrying in an echo. Ezra stands beside him, staring me down with a look that says he does not share his companion's enthusiasm to see me. Even from a distance, I can sense his suspicion, and something else all too reminiscent of loathing. Those emotions emanate from him like heat from a fire. If I get too close, I might get burned. Jenner runs toward us, skipping every third step. He stops next to me, flashing a broad grin as he bites into an apple. "How's it going?" he asks, spitting a little. Before either of us can answer, Ezra skulks across the room, his furious gaze fixated on Ray. "Why did you let her out?" he barks. Huffing, she plants her hands on her hips and tosses her long hair over her shoulder with a graceful sway of her head. "I already told you, she isn't our enemy. We should stop treating her like one." She snaps back. I glance between them, taken aback by their annoyance with each other, and afraid of being caught in the line of fire. I can feel their impending argument, like the first drops of rain in the air. Beside me, Jenner lets out a sigh. When I look over at him, he winks and then slings an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close to his side. "Hey, why don't we go sit down and have a chat? Sound good?" I look back at Ezra and Ray. The fight I predicted is now erupting between them. An explosion of anger volleyed back and forth like they're playing a verbal sport. It's amazing they can understand anything they're saying with the way they're screaming over each other. I can hardly make out a single word. It makes me wonder what they are to each other that gives them the right to speak so openly. Confrontation is frowned upon in our society. Confrontation means disobedience, and disobedience makes you an enemy of the state. Like most things, disobedience is dangerous. Then again, I suppose they're free of those rules here. I allow Jenner to steer me away to an unoccupied seating area in one corner of the large room, far away from Ray and Ezra, but not so far we can't still hear the distant drone of their bickering. Once we settle on one of the benches, he reaches into a nearby crate and offers me a bottle of water. "Thanks," I mutter. He leans back, looking at me for a moment, then stretches his right arm out in front of me. I peer down at his empty hand. "I don't think I've properly introduced myself yet. The name's Jenner Rhodes." Unsure what else to do, I extend my fingers, shivering a little when his skin grazes mine. As we shake hands, a memory hits the front of my thoughts. My father once told me this is how people used to greet one another. But, like most things, the gesture died away, along with everything else that existed before the state came into power. I can't help wondering why. Did the state outlaw this simple greeting, or did people just stop wanting to know one another because of their fear of betrayal? When did we stop caring about anything but our own survival? We sit in silence for a while, staring out across the vast empty space. Ezra and Ray have given up on their fight and subsequently stormed off in different directions. Part of me worries I should have followed Ray when she left, but I find Jenner's company too comforting to move. If I wasn't in good hands, she wouldn't have left me here. I agree with Ray, he says. I don't think you're one of them. It doesn't escape my notice how he spits that last word. You seem to be the only ones, I point out. A crooked smile hooks up the left side of his mouth. Nah, you're an innocent. I can tell. I've seen those bastards up close enough times to know the difference. He leans in, his breath warm against my ear. Don't worry. Everyone else will see that soon enough. Even Ezra, I'm tempted to ask. I watch Jenner out of the corner of my eye, intrigued by his carefree manner and easygoing personality. Like Ray, he's choosing to trust me when I haven't given him any logical reason to. Why? Aren't these people supposed to be wanted criminals? Monsters, the state always called them. They don't seem like that to me. But aside from a surface portrayal of kindness, what do I really know about them? My thoughts turn back to Ezra. It's hard to believe the man who pointed a gun at my head twice now is the same man from my vision. And yet, even though he's keeping his distance from me, I can sense a connection between us. Something that tells me what I saw in my vision was real. And the man I saw in that future wasn't a monster. None of these people are. This place, my eyes skirt across the dome-shaped ceiling. None of it is like what I imagined. Jenner laughs. I know what you mean. I thought the same thing when I first arrived here. Maybe that's why I find it so easy to accept you, considering I was you once. Everyone here was. They just don't want to admit it. Change can be hard for some to embrace. He grins at my confused expression. Ezra's not always such an ass, I promise. He's just trying to keep everyone safe. And responsibility sometimes comes with trust issues. If you think you can trust him, you're wrong. As Dr. Richter's warning once again reverberates in my ears, it occurs to me that Ezra isn't the one who needs to be trusted in this scenario. He isn't the one in question. I am. I'm the one who needs to earn his trust, not the other way around. It's all lies, Everything they say about us. Jenner hunches forward, resting his forearms on his knees and lacing his fingers together, joining his hands. There's a sadness in his eyes when he stares down at them. All that violence in the heart is attributed to Phoenix. But in reality, we don't cause any of it. Our goal isn't to hurt anyone. No one here wants blood on their hands. You mean the state? I ask, raising my eyebrows. He nods but doesn't meet my gaze. Do you have any idea how it feels to be called a terrorist when you're just trying to survive? I sink my teeth into my lower lip, fighting back the burning sensation building along the edges of my vision. I can imagine all too well what Jenner must be feeling. Isn't that how I was treated just because I didn't finish my placement exam? Just because there's something wrong with me that I have no control over? Hell, the people at the DSD acted as if I wasn't even a human being. But none of that, no matter how much sense it makes to me, explains why the state would lie about Phoenix. What would it get out of frightening the masses with the constant threat of terrorism? If you aren't responsible for the attacks, fear leads to control, and control guarantees the government's longevity. I suppose that's all the incentive they need. I just wish people knew the truth about us. Mindless violence won't bring about change. I stare at him for a long moment, haunted by that sentiment. Mindless violence. Like what Dr. Richter did to me. What will? I whisper. Honestly? He peeks up at me through thick lashes, his expression youthful and uncertain. I'm still trying to figure that one out. For as long as I can remember, the state has always portrayed Phoenix as a force to be reckoned with, to be feared. But as I listen to Jenner, I can't help questioning who the victims really are in all of this. My exposure to the people here has been limited, but I've seen enough to know they aren't terrorists or murderers. They're no different than the people I've walked past on the street every single day of my life. They're just a group of scared individuals doing whatever it takes to survive. The solemn look on Jenner's face makes me eager to change the subject. My thoughts shift back to Ezra and Ray, and a spark of curiosity forms my next question for me. They're your friends, right? Ezra and Ray? How did they get involved with Phoenix? He scratches his chin. Well, Ez and Ray have known each other since they were kids. They've gone through all of this together, every step of the way. Together. On a personal level, I don't even know what that word means. How about you? I ask. How did you end up joining? He runs a hand through his disheveled obsidian hair as his cheeks turn a subtle shade of red. I had a run-in with the authorities when I was 17. It was a misunderstanding more than anything else. A case of wrong place, wrong time. Anyway, Ezra and Ray got me out of that bind. That was 3 years ago, and they've been stuck with me ever since. His tone gives off the distinct impression the life of a rebel wasn't something he wanted. Looks like we have that in common. You don't seem too happy about that, I note. He averts his gaze, wringing his hands in his lap. It's not that I don't feel grateful toward them for saving my life. It's just that, from the moment they intervened, everything changed. I had to leave my entire life behind, and my family suffered as a result of my idiocy. I couldn't risk going to see them again, not even to say goodbye. I grimace at the string of thoughts that forms. Would they have wanted to say goodbye? Or would they have been as callous as my mother? Would they have handed you over? When the enforcers couldn't find me, my parents and sister were brought in for questioning. He pauses, casting a meaningful glance at me. You know what the DSD is like. My family didn't know anything about where I was, or what I did, and yet they were branded as enemies of the state, just because we were related. They were sent to termination shortly after. I don't know what to say. What is there to say? He's right. I do know what the DSD is like. I can imagine all too well the horrors his family would have gone through. Jenner shakes his head, then says, I know I'm responsible for what happened to them. If I had died or just let the enforcers apprehend me, the state wouldn't have had any reason to hurt them. It would have left them alone. You don't know that. My father's face fills up the space in my mind. Looking back, how close did Mother and I come to receiving the same punishment as Jenner's family? Were we only spared because he got caught? At the same time, their deaths are my reason for fighting, you know? His eyes lock on mine, holding my attention rapt. I want to prevent these kinds of needless tragedies from happening to anyone else. A sharp pain clenches my heart, and the sympathy arising within me seems powerful enough to drown an entire city. I can't even comprehend Jenner's pain. Well, I can, but I was young when my father was taken, and with time, those memories will fade. But Jenner, he might not be so lucky. That pain could live with him forever. I startle when he pokes me in the cheek with his finger. That right there, he says through a smile. That's how I know you're not one of them. I reel back as goosebumps rise across my arms. my eyes narrowing in confusion. The way he's staring at me is unnerving. No one's ever looked at me this way before. "What do you mean?" I ask. The seconds roll by, but he doesn't answer. Before I can press him, he looks away, turning his attention to the opposite side of the room. I follow his gaze to see Ray walking toward us. "How'd it go?" he asks once she's closer. She pushes a tired breath out through her nose. "He's being difficult, but he just needs some time to mull things over. He'll come around eventually." I recall the sour expression on Ezra's face when he saw me, and the rage in his eyes during his altercation with Ray. Why was he so angry? And what exactly were they fighting about? Me, probably. My heart sinks as Ray and Jenner launch into a conversation about one important thing or another, their voices growing faint as I rest back against the wooden slats of the bench and allow my troubled thoughts to devour me. The images in my head replay my nightmare from earlier, except it isn't my father who I'm seeing this time. It's Ezra. My lungs constrict when he speaks. "I'm sorry, Wynter." He says those same words again, over and over, always the same words flooding my ears, but they never offer any explanation or give any hint about what will happen between us, or why he'll apologize for it. He says them until I hear nothing else, and the other sounds of the world die away